there's this scene between them where they share a little bit about, what would it be like to go back? And welcome back to No Script, an unscripted conversation about theater's best scripts. I'm Jackson, that's Jacob. Excited to be back. We are back from our summer hiatus and ready and just raring to go to jump into a new season.
We are so back. It's so exciting to be back. This felt like a longer break than normal, in part, I think, because both you and I had crazy life stuff happening in this particular break. And so this is we're getting back to it after doing all kinds of other crazy stuff this time around.
It's true. Big job changes, region changes, all sorts of things, brain space changes. And so it's exciting to be jumping back into this rather familiar pattern, at least for me, to be able to re-engage it again. Always fun to knock the rust off, too, after a full summer away. So
boy, yeah. Well, and familiar, too, because we're to start this season, we are going way back to the way that No Script used to begin, which is that we're starting this season in a resurrection of an old tradition with a play by the Big G great Lynn Nottage.
Yes, absolutely. The early days of the traditions of No Script were to always start the season with a Lynn Nottage play, and excited to be returning it to that process today with the play. By the way, meet Vera Stark.
A lot of stuff has changed about No Script in our this is season 15. We're episode 1 of season 15 right now, which seems insane. I was just talking to somebody the other day about how long we've been doing it, how many episodes we've done, the amount of work that is now out there, and the amount of hours of us discussing plays that now exist on the internet, and all that time
AI that's been fed by our voices.
Well, no doubt about that. Boy, that's scary. But one thing that hasn't changed: Lynn Nottage still a genius. You pick up a Lynn Nottage play and you are like, boy, this is as good as it gets.
For sure. Yep. It's exciting to be returning once again to it. It's just the way that the characters all are both so witty, so funny, but also so heavy hitting throughout the whole thing. Can make you cry, make you laugh. Exciting to be able to return to a Nottage play again.
And Lynn Nottage is so good. And I'm not going to be able to come up with the citation for this quote, which I feel bad about. But as I was prepping for my teaching this semester, I came across, again, I'm so frustrated I can't remember who, but somebody said something to the effect of every time you direct or stage a show, you are making some kind of commentary on the nature of performance, on, the performance as a performance, not just as a story. And Lynn Nottage is so good at that. Her plays all say something about the nature of theater and theatricality and performance at the same time that they're telling whatever story is within the framework or within the the content or whatever. And this play, just a fascinating, I don't know if you'd call it a twist, I guess, or a real sudden shift at the act break into the play being something different than assuming that you go in without any idea of what you're going into, something very different than you expected from Act 1.
For sure, yeah. If you roll through Act 1 sort of expecting that you'll get a similar experience going forward, you're definitely sort of surprised, I imagine, or excited perhaps by the change that comes along in Act 2. And it does such a really interesting job of playing with time. Excited to talk about this more in the kind of bulk of the episode, but playing with time in such a way that you don't lose track of the core set time, the first time that you engage in. You're not bounced around so much that you lose track of what's going on. So I really enjoyed that way to play with time in this play.
Yeah, and it's a play that seems to require, I'm always hesitant to say 100% have to, but this one's pretty close, you to create a film in order to do this play. I think you have to make a short movie in order to do that. And as I've been researching other productions, I have not yet come across one where it seemed like they didn't do that.
Ooh, okay, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because yeah, absolutely. There's the kind of a movie within the play, and interview within a play, so that is supposedly on film as well. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how to grapple with those particular things in staging it.
Yeah, it's a play about making a movie and then about the way in which
Yeah.
that movie exists culturally throughout time. That's like,
Mm-hmm.
if you were, that's obviously not like a good marketing summary of, by the way, Miss Sarah, but if you're trying to like distill it down to like, this play is in some way about the making of a piece of art, and especially the racial politics around making a piece of art, and the way in which the industry enforces racial stereotypes and oppression, the making of it, and then the way that thing evolves and changes over time, which for artists, like, that's a very interesting investigation in and of itself. Like, how does race and politics of power, influence the stuff that we make? And then how is that stuff going to be then reinterpreted across the course of time?
Yeah. Yeah, with the knowledge of like that we get of the audience of kind of being behind the curtain, that if only the interviewers could have been behind the curtain, like they long to have been behind the curtain.
It really relies on dramatic irony in that way.
It does, yeah.
You'll learn, of course, those out there listening, what we're describing, hopefully, as we move along, if you're not familiar with the play. Before we get there, though, another tradition of No Script is to say a huge thank you to our Patreon patrons, those folks who head over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/noscriptpodcast, all one word, no hyphens, no underscores. Over there, folks have become supporters of the show. This show exists right now in its 15th season because we have folks that choose to support the show financially. We love to do this show. It's been a great part of our lives and our artistic journeys, but it doesn't exist without the support of our Patreon folks. If that's not you yet, we encourage you to check it out, but we know that there are folks who it is for. And so we like to start our seasons by saying an express thank you to the folks who are as part of the playwright tier over on our Patreon account. Of course, there's different tiers, and everybody over on the Patreon page is part of making this show possible. We like to give just a special shout out to those folks who are at the playwright tier on our Patreon page. And as episode 1 of season 15, this is our moment. We want to say thank you to...
Yes, thank you so much to Albert Dayan, Brennan Sauer, Brock Burek, Krista Dunn, Christopher Scott, Craig Elliott Frew, David Lindsay Aber, David Miller, Joanna Lawler, Jonathan Edge, Kyle and Lisa Tenholzen, Liliana Hogan, Natasha, Patricia Ralph, Paul Hopkins, and Roger Hartley. Thank you all for being playwright tier patrons of the show, and thank you, as Jacob already said as well, to all of our patrons. Y'all make this show possible. We love getting to do the show, love getting to chat with each other about theater's best scripts, and to kind of extend the conversation out to all of you, and y'all make it possible. So thank you all so much. If you're looking for a way to help out the show, if you're excited to kind of see us back again this season, and maybe you want to be a part of the patron-only posts or what we got going on over at Patreon, you can head over to patreon.com/noscriptpodcast, and we will see you over there.
And now, for the first time in season 15, back to the script.
Here we go.
Hey, okay, so if you're new to the podcast, if you're joining us at the beginning of season 15, the thing that we like to do to begin every conversation is to offer just a brief, what we call context and synopsis. The context usually I'll give talks about kind of the surroundings of the production, how the script came about, its famous productions, awards. If we haven't talked about the playwright, I'll also usually introduce the playwright, and then Jackson will give us a brief synopsis of the plot of the show, so that if you're unfamiliar with the play or the musical in its entirety, you at least have some familiarity with the story as we then launch into an unscripted conversation, which covers a wide variety of things just based on what we found interesting about the play, just an opportunity to talk about the play. So let me start by just saying we've talked a lot about Lynn Nottage on this podcast. This is I didn't even look back at how many episodes of Lynn Nottage plays we've done, but it's a lot. And so check out any of those others for more introductions to Lynn Nottage and her career. She is obviously one of the major living, working American playwrights right now, if not, at the very, very top of that list. This play, by the way, Meet Vera Stark, won the 2010 Edgerton Foundation New American Play Award and was nominated for a Drama Desk in 2012. So there's a lot of interesting things about like how this play comes to be and the stuff that happens around it. It premieres off Broadway at Second Stage Theater in 2011. And around this play, so the play is in part about an actress, a black actress in the 1930s, essentially. And that actress character is kind of an amalgamation of names you might recognize, people like Teresa Harris, Mildred Washington, Nina Mae McKinney. But when the play premieres in New York, Lynn Nottage creates around the play this digital material that is sort of designed to suggest that Vera Stark was a real person. So there is this website that you can visit. There's actually a couple of websites listed in the script. Not all of them are still functioning, but one that still is as of the recording of this podcast is meetverastark.com. You can go visit it. Type it into your browser right now, meetverastark.com, and what you will find is a website that purports to be by a gentleman who is later a character in the play, who I'll let Jackson introduce, and it sort of tracks the biography, the filmography, the rumors of this 1930s and later. She would have created movies across the 20th century, a lot of it, named Vera Stark. And there's a little documentary that's made about Vera Stark that is on this website. And there's other materials, including like an interview for the LA premiere at the Geffen Playhouse just a year later in 2012, where the interviewer is purported to be Carmen Levy Green, who is a character in the play, and the interviewer essentially tells the story of Vera Stark and how he lost all of her footage because there was a big fire at the Celestial Pictures warehouse, and how she's been a researcher of Vera Stark for all these years and finally found Lynn Nottage did a play, and how she was initially skeptical about Lynn Nottage and a playwright might portray this actress badly, but she really ended up sort of being won over by the faithful portrayal and the willingness of Lynn Nottage to sort of tell it like it is. So there's all this material created around the show that is kind of, and Lynn Nottage says in an interview, it's not necessarily designed to trick you per se. Like, she's not necessarily trying to convince large swaths of people that this was a real person. But it is designed to, I think she says it this way, sort of let you participate in the game. At least let you join in on the idea that this was a real person who as Jackson will describe in his synopsis, like the second part of the play is a lot about the question of this real person. So that aside, that it wasn't necessarily her stated intention to go out and trick people, she does say that a lot of people who came to see the play in New York didn't realize that Vera was a fake person, and in some ways came to find out who she is as this purported, lost movie star who a lot of her early filmography was lost to this, fictional fire. So just something interesting about like the world around the show when it initially came out. It seems to me that now that the show, has been around for 15 years or so, it's not as much a part of the show to bring the audience into the idea that Vera Stark is real as it was when it initially came out. In some ways, that's because now you can easily access, things like the reviews and Wikipedia pages that say blah, blah, blah about a fictional movie star named Vera Stark that wouldn't have, existed when the play was new. So again, 2011, off-Broadway premiere at Second Stage, 2012, LA premiere at Geffen Playhouse, and then it has an incredibly robust production life across the next 13 years to get us to now and into next year, as I'll describe. In 2013, it's at the Goodman Theater in Chicago, the Lyric Stage Company in Boston, the Trustus Theater in South Carolina, the Alliance Theater in Atlanta. 2014, it's at the Unicorn Theater in Kansas City. 2015, it's at Georgetown University, Long Beach Playhouse, Pomona College, Venice Theater in Florida. 2017, University of Washington, Ursinus College, Kalamazoo Civic Theater. 2019, it's at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. It's at it has at Webster University, and then it has a revival off Broadway at the Signature Theater in New York City. And that's a lot of the really big time material that you can find online now is about that Signature Theater production. Signature Theater is just so good at making, I would call it essentially like dramaturgical material surrounding the show, interviews, backstage videos, study guides. They just create all kinds of stuff for their shows. It's really, really awesome. We skip, of course, the pandemic years. 2021, the Colonial Players in Maryland, Barnard College in New York City. 22, Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center, the Naples Players in Florida, Stage Crafters Theater in Philly. 23, the Corcoran School of the Arts in D.C., Rooftop Productions in Virginia, Red House in Syracuse. 24, Santa Clara University, the Artistic Home in Chicago, which is one of the theaters that produces out of the Den, is my understanding. If you're Chicago aware, you know about the Den. In 24, also Duke University and Hofstra University on Long Island. And then this year, in 2025, in the very beginning of the year, the Kentwood Players in California. And then just a couple of months ago, Theater Huntsville in Alabama. And this coming April 2026, Governor State University in Illinois is scheduled to do a production. So again, these production histories are not full. I assume there is stuff that I missed. Sometimes we get people who are like, by the way, there's also this production. That's great. We love to hear that kind of stuff. I don't purport to get it 100% every single production ever, but I like to give a sense of this has been the production life of this show. And as you can see, I mean, for being a play that's 15 years old, it has had, it's really well produced. I mean, it has really been kind of all over the country at all different sizes of theater. You get the Signature Theater in New York, you get the Kalamazoo Civic Theater, you get all kinds of colleges. I mean, it's really been produced a lot. And that is interesting to me for reasons that we will discuss, not the least of which is that it seems like kind of a hard play to produce in some ways.
Yeah, some technical challenges in this play for sure. Excited to jump into the conversation. Going to get into a short summarization of this particular plot. About this time in the show, though, we like to just kind of note our particular social position. We're two white guys talking about this play, and this play definitely deals with the topic of race and equality, and especially within the artistic community and 1930s film scene. And so while we are very excited about talking about this play, we believe it's one of theater's best scripts, and we're excited to talk into it today. We want to acknowledge the necessary limitations that exist because of our particular social position, and want to prompt further conversation as a result of that.
Yeah, we like to say, like, these conversations are never, ever, for any script ever, the end-all, be-all conversations. They're also not like lectures where we sort of present the things that we think you have to know about the play. These are conversations about what we found interesting and particularly noteworthy to discuss, and we're people with a particular limited perspective on the world based on our lived experience, right? And so for any play ever, we always encourage other voices to talk to us about the play. We talk about that at the end of every episode, but also go out and listen to other voices talk about the play. Especially for a play like this, though, we're going to provide some other resources, some other conversations. That often includes reviews, lectures, all kinds of things that we find around that we think are, maybe something else that you could check out to get a different perspective on the play, to listen to somebody else talk or read somebody else discuss the play. So those are going to be in the show notes. You just scroll down and check them out. We'll have some links there to some other great material about By the Way, Meet Vera Stark.
That being said, let's jump into the short summary and then into the conversation about this play. This play, as we've already sort of alluded to, takes place across a couple of different times. It starts in 1933, but will eventually jump to 2003 and then back to 1973. So I'll try to briefly summarize each of those different moments so we can jump into the conversation well. The play starts and we meet Vera Stark and Gloria Mitchell. I'll give you their character descriptions here real quick. Gloria Mitchell is 28, white in quotation marks, starlet in a dressing gown, lies across the couch in the scene. And then there's Vera Stark, who's a 28, an African-American beauty wearing a maid's uniform. And we quickly deduce and learn that Vera is Gloria's maid or handler or maybe caretaker, in some ways agent. Is helping Gloria practice for a audition for this big movie that occupies the majority of this play's focus. That is The Belle of New Orleans, which is kind of an 1800s piece about a Southern belle who falls in love with this merchant who's a rich merchant in New Orleans. It's set in the 1800s, but she has this secret that while she presents as white, that she has some African heritage and is described as an octoroon, something that is taboo in that particular moment. So Gloria is doing the work of doing audition prep for that particular film coming up, and Vera is helping her with that. We move through a couple of different scenes in this sort of like time of auditions for the Belle of New Orleans. We learn more and more about Gloria, who is sort of America's darling child or something like that. Some sort of phrase about her being like this like sweet, innocent sort of actress within film history of 1933. But then we meet also Vera's roommates. We meet Lottie and Anna Mae. Lottie is also all of them are auditioning for plays. Lottie is described as, or for movies, sorry. Lottie is described as in her 20s, a pretty heavy-set brown-skinned woman, and then Anna Mae is described as very, very light-skinned, and so which becomes important a little bit later on. So they're all like trying to find roles in different things, and Anna Mae is starting to try to like have relationships with directors and try to like find ways into the movie scene via her dating life. So they're all trying to get into movies different ways, but Vera begins to notice that there's a really particular role, the role that she was kind of being a scene partner for Gloria for within the movie The Belle of New Orleans, that she would really like to audition for. Along the way, we also meet Leroy, who eventually Vera marries, though not within the context of this 1933 set of scenes. But he's a musician in the area, and he's a driver for the director of the writer of the film. He meets with Vera outside of Gloria, going to auditions, and has this interesting conversation about like, well, the role that you're auditioning for is essentially Gloria's maid servant, and kind of leans into the stereotypes of like the 1800s African American servant, in the kind of late 1800s narrative there in New Orleans. So there's some tension between them on what they're supporting with that and whether that stereotype is helpful for her to lean into. But Vera also notes that like she's been wanting to be in movies her whole life, and this, she feels like, is her way into it. The scene this time frame sort of culminates in a big evening for Gloria, in which she's hosting both the head of the studio, Mr. Slasvik, and the writer of the movie, Maximilian Van Oster, who kind of show up, and there's this big night where they're all sort of pitching involvement in the movie. Gloria's pitching her involvement in the movie. Lottie is there because she's there to help Vera sort of host the evening. And both Lottie and Vera end up trying to like eventually work their way into the film, as Maximilian Van Oster has this like essentially monologue that he's monologuing about how great it would be to have real people in the movie, not actresses, but real people with lived experience in the movie. And they sort of do almost like an audition in the room for him with this sort of stereotype of whatever quote unquote real people are to Maximilian Van Oster. Also, Anna Mae is there because she's there on a date with Maximilian. And so the whole cast is there, and they kind of like are negotiating whether or not they're going to get into this movie or not.
And whether the movie's even going to be made, part of the, one of the sort of film history things about the play that neither Jackson and I are like super educated enough to talk a lot about, but there is this discussion of the movie being pre-code, and there's a code of ethics called the Hays Code that's implemented in Hollywood in the late 30s that has really specific rules about what can and can't be shown on screen, including interracial marriages and relationships, also, references to sex and sexuality. There's all kinds of stuff. It was a very, very strict ethical code, and this in the way the play is written, this movie ends up being right before that code is implemented, and the suggestion is that the material in this movie is part of what prompts the code to sort of come into existence.
Yeah. Yep. For instance, another element is Maximilian has written this play to be set in a brothel, and Mr. Slasvik is like, wait, we can't do that. We don't want to. What will that do? So yeah, there's all sorts of things like that that's sort of like up in the air whether it's going to be made at all. And then we sort of like smash cut.
That's the end of Act 1, yeah.
That's the end of Act 1, yeah. We act break, we intermission smash cut to a black and white film of the Belle of New Orleans.
So the audience comes back from intermission, and I think from what I can tell, which is a substantial number of productions and production material, the audience comes back to essentially a screening of this movie, the last, call it 5-6 minutes of this film. And I think it's literally a film. Like, I don't think the audience is watching the actors do this live. It seems to be really a movie. And in fact, you can go on YouTube and watch various theaters' version of this scene.
Sure. yeah. And in the as far as the stage directions go, that would seem to be called for, that it's a black and white film.
There's things like
showed.
Close up on so and so, which is like you don't that's not a stage direction that means anything in like a live stage play.
right. For sure. Yep. So definitely, yeah. So kind of a jarring experience coming back to that. You kind of see the main death scene of the play where Marie, played by Gloria, dies in the arms of Vera, and you see Lottie and Anna May have made their way into the film as well, and so you kind of see that they did in fact make the movie, and actually they all got their roles. That maybe not the roles that they were necessarily hoping for, but they all got a role in the film, and certainly Gloria and Vera got the roles that they were angling for. And then another sort of jarring experience occurs in which you are pulled out of that film is stopped or paused in some way, and a new character arrives on the stage, and that's Herb Forrester.
New character, not a new actor, though. And that, I think, is a fascinating part of the show. But yes, continue.
yes. All these roles are required doubled by the script.
Not optional doubled, which I think is fascinating. Required doubled.
Mm-hmm. So the same actor who would have played Leroy, again, the musician who Vera met and eventually married in the first act of the play, plays Herb Forrester, who comes on and sort of gives this like welcome to the colloquium on the life or acting career of Vera Stark and her strange disappearance from the acting world and the performance world, and happy you are all here tonight, etc. And we're going to dive into a detailed exploration of her life, and then he invites two more guests on, again doubled characters. Carmen comes on stage, and that's the played by the same actress who played Lottie. And then Afua comes on stage as well, played by the same actress who played Anna May. And they kind of both have written notable works about Vera, and they're here to kind of give their feedback and input on some of both the clips that were just shown, and also an interview that is going to be revealed tonight for the first time.
Right. Well, Carmen, I think, is her character is like a professor of gender studies, and then Afua is more of like a poet artist sort of character, and then Herb is like particularly like a Vera Stark expert. And of course the website that I described earlier is designed to look as if it's made by him, and the documentary as well.
I probably won't try to summarize too much what their conversation is, but throughout the rest of the play, they provide sort of feedback on continuously played clips that have either the clips from the movie or eventually the big reveal of the night is that there's a new interview that they've found, or not a new interview. An interview happened in 1973 on a show by Brad Donovan, late night talk show host. Think that sort of a thing.
Really colorful, really slick set, yeah.
Yep. That was the last time Vera Stark appeared in public or was interviewed.
And I do think they say it's like recently uncovered footage.
Yeah. Yep. So that's the big reveal tonight that everyone's going to be kind of let in on. And throughout the rest of the play, as they sort of play the tape of the 1973 interview, though that I believe is live,
I think that not a is movie. Live performed. The interview portion is live performed by live actors in the room. Whereas the Belle of New Orleans film is literally a film that you watch. That is what I think is suggested in the script.
That's my inclination as well. So throughout the rest of the evening at this colloquium, they offer sort of insights to this interview that happens where Vera, now in like her 60s-ish, is kind of invited on stage by Brad Donovan, as well as like a British rock star is also a guest on.
Just like
Peter
the
Rhys
most
Davies.
Like stoned, random British rock star character.
Yep. and they start to talk about like some of what she's doing now, but very little of that, because it becomes clear that while she's had a 30-40 year career that involved many movies, something like 40 to 50 films, and her involvement in civil rights movements, and her involvement in once the code was put in place, and the sort of way that the film industry was handling her as an African American actress within the film industry. Despite all of that, the thing that everyone is still talking about is her performance in The Belle of New Orleans. And so she is kind of grappling with that. Some of the both the niceness that people liked her performance, but also the weight of carrying maybe perhaps what was a breakout role for her, but was a limited sort of character for her as well. The last sort of like big turn that I'll talk about within that interview, it goes on and there's kind of a lot of back and forth between them, and there's lots of input from the 2003 panel throughout. Yep. But the big surprise that Brad Donovan has is that he has another special guest for that night, and it's Gloria Mitchell, flown in from London where she now lives. She and Vera have not talked in like maybe 5-10 years or something like that since she has been gone for a long time. And there's this kind of like live fire, both love for each other and connecting again, but also clearly some pain between them that kind of emerges into a sort of an angry, at one point shouting between the two of them about how when the other one was upstaged by the other, and also what sort of betrayal could have been a part of those moments as they sort of like grew into co-stars together out of the relationship that they had before. And it ends poignantly between them, ends with sort of an acknowledgement of each other and support of each other, and eventually that interview comes to an end. There's some sort of like last reflection that's notable from the panel in 2003 about like what could that have been, and there's lots of wondering around like both where Vera went after that interview, but also what could we deduce about Vera and Gloria's relationship? Were they lovers? Were they sisters, is suggested? Were they just sort of like star and maid? Or was there something more going on between them, certainly as they developed into co-stars together? Those sort of suggestions are all thrown out. Another argument ensues in 2003 that kind of leads to another moment of shouting, at least one moment of shouting. And the panel sort of wraps up as well. And we get one more scene, and I think this is where I'll end this rather actually quite long, as it's a complicated script in terms of time summary. But there's one more scene that's sort of a behind the scenes moment on the filming of the scene of the Belle of New Orleans. It's between Vera and Gloria, and there's this really poignant line in the movie where, as Marie, played by Gloria, is dying, she says to Vera's character, "I'm free," and dies. They're going through this scene back and forth, and it's not working. They're going for, I think, a sixth take is talked about at some point, and so they kind of step off to rehearse for a second. And there's this scene between them where they share a little bit about, what would it be like to go back from this moment. We're both in this movie. We're both like movie stars in this particular moment. What would it be like to go back? And it's not just a back to what we've seen so far in 1933, but it's talking about go back to like Brooklyn when we were like a part of the Players out there, and when we were in that same house with Grandma, and kind of wondering. There's some not clear. We don't get a lot of like clear answers for some of the wonderings about what their relationship was before, but we know for sure that there's more to Gloria and Vera's relationship than perhaps even we've been exposed to in our 1933 version of the story.
I do think that to me it seems strongly implied that the historical reinterpretation of their relationship that Carmen, the professor, offers, which is that they were cousins rather than sisters, and that Gloria then was like white passing in a way that Vera was not, and that really impacted Gloria's career. Some of what happens between them in that interview in the 70s is that Vera expresses a fair amount of frustration about the roles and the legacy she's been able to have, whereas Gloria, by virtue of being white or white passing, has been able to have a far more notable career in different ways. And so I think that is one of the major things that Lynn Nottage is looking at in this play in terms of like historical race politics and power politics, is about the kinds of roles that were offered to Black people, Black women especially, through a lot of the 20th century. And she even says, I think this is for an interview for the Geffen, but it could have been one of the other theaters, in which case I apologize to that theater. But Lynn Nottage says, that's what I'm asking with Vera Stark. The next time you see one of those films, and she's talking about films where Black people played maids, slaves, those kinds of sort of servant characters from especially the early 20th century, but you see it throughout the middle of the 20th century too. When you see one of those films where the portrayal is not very nuanced, the writing of the character is fairly racist, etc., she says that I want you to be conscious of the politics of the film and of Hollywood at the time. If you speak to, and this is the writer, and of course of Hollywood Today, now Lynn Nottage again, if you speak to any African-American actress, I think they will echo a lot of the themes in the play. I mean, for God's sake, Kerry Washington is the first African-American woman in 30 years to star in a primetime show on a network. In 30 years, And so some of, I think, what Lynn Nottage is looking at is the politics around casting, especially Black women, the kinds of roles that they were able to have throughout history, and then still the problem that exists today.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, that's certainly at the heart of this, like whatever the dyad of Gloria and Vera is. And we get, I think, such a zoom in on that in that last scene. And this conversation between them sparks the scene that everyone talks about for the next 40 years, this like death scene between the two of them and what they both do in that scene, because Vera suggests to Gloria suggests to Gloria that the character Marie is kind of speaking to Tilly, Vera's character, and like really describing, I'm finally liberated. I'll just read the line here. Yes, Marie is finally liberated, and she's telling Tilly for the first time what it means to be free of prejudice, truly free. And with that interpretation, they go back on and assumedly get the shot, get the final scene, and that's the last moment of the play.
Yeah, and it the other thing that is like going on in terms of what is the reason why Lynn Nottage just set this play in history, perhaps this is somewhat speculation. This is from she is introducing a more recent production of the play, and she's talking about. She says, when I wrote this play, I was really interested in how those stereotypes were formed and how we as African Americans aided and abetted those stereotypes. Those stereotypes continue to this day, and this is a conversation that continues to this day. And so that, I think, is a nod at, in the 2000s timeline, this sort of panel that is looking back at the legacy of Vera Stark and her mysterious disappearance. Their debate ends up being in some ways about the kinds of characters that Vera played and how we're supposed to understand her place. Again, she's a fictional actor, but her place in the portrayal of African Americans on screen, in more large cultural movements like that throughout history. And it is, I mean, if you spend any time in academia or going to conferences like this is like trying to understand how we should contextualize today historical pieces of art that have worldviews that are fairly objectionable to us today. That's a real like, it is not a very easy question to answer. And Lynn Nottage, I think, has presented several fairly characters who are fairly invested in their competing points of view on that.
Yeah. And I think what I like that this, particularly what the form of this play allows as a lens into that, is that, yes, we're engaging this panel, and yeah, I agree. It's a sort of a familiar way that each of these experts bring their particular lens to it, and thus their interpretation is necessarily different and varied throughout it. And they're all bringing like sort of their best expert guesses at what things could be.
And they've all like written books and stuff. So there's
right.
They have stakes in their own personal professional opinions, which is a huge part of these conferences too, is like you're invested in not changing your mind because you wrote a book about it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And then for us as the audiences, we kind of have a sort of higher expertise because we saw like a true to life, fairly realism centric first act of this play, and we're with these characters in the moment before this film happened, and get to see the kind of live fire negotiation, oftentimes very comedic negotiation between them as they all were trying to get into this movie together.
Yeah, it is like really reliant on dramatic irony that the characters that we are watching so hotly debate this in the 2000s timeline, we have access to like information that they don't have, because we've seen at least a couple of scenes of the private life of these characters. And so there's just like really smart, strong, writerly use of dramatic irony there. But there's also this other thing going on. I mean, there's so much going on in this play. I just am fascinated by its like performance theory-ness. Mm-hmm. But like one of the other weird, cool performance things going on is the doubling, right? Because all these people are the same actors that did all this stuff that they're talking about. I mean, literally at one point, the guy playing Herb is the guy who played Leroy. And so at one point, Carmen is making a sort of longer point about Vera's relationship with her husband, Leroy. And she says, like, roll the footage. And you watch like a documentary footage. And again, my understanding is that it's like a real film you have to create of an interview with Leroy. And I assume sitting on stage is the same actor playing a different character. Right. And again, I just want to highlight how, to me, it's super important that the cast list doesn't say, like, if your production wants to, you can double these roles. Because doubling is sometimes used just like practically to sort of solve money problems of casting actors in smaller roles, right? So there's some like practical benefit to doubling. But I don't think that's what this is. Yeah. Because in this case, the doubling is required. Mm-hmm. So it must be the case that the same actor is sitting there as Herb watching himself as Leroy in the documentary footage.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely irony there, and like sort of commentary that the other is giving to the other going on. Certainly there's like the commentary of like the double cast of Maximilian von Oster and Peter Rhys Davies, both of these sort of like from like American film culture perspective, these sort of outsiders who sort of fly in with these big grandiose artistic visions or ways of life. So there's, I think it's absolutely very intentional and thus essential that these roles are double cast because they are saying something. They're saying something intentional that the playwright wants them to be kind of pushing at with each of these double casts.
Yeah, like it's sort of one of the basic tenets of performance theory, right? And I know we don't talk a lot about this on the podcast, but one of the basic tenets is like, as you watch a performance, you're never just watching the story. You're also watching like the fact of the performance, right? You see the actor within the character. And so Lynn Nottage has always been really smart about how she employs that. Even like a play like Sweat, which a lot of people are familiar with, has a lot of like back and forth in time. Even while like we know those are the same actors, they literally aren't transporting through time, right?
Right.
And so in this case, we see these actors who are both in 1930 and now in purportedly the year 2000. And we know they're actually also in the year 2025, if you saw one of the 2025 productions of this show. And I wonder if Lynn Nottage is using this doubling as a way to bring out in a more subconscious way those questions she's asking about like how this is still alive today. These problems, these real meaningful stereotypes that are like still persistent. I wonder about that. I wonder about the idea that there is some like distancing, like some Brechtian like alienation to the idea that we're seeing these people who, wait a minute, weren't they the same people from earlier and now they're other people, but they're talking about those same people from earlier as if they weren't those people?
Yeah, for sure. And then also like the centralizing of focus on Vera and Gloria as the only non-doubled
characters. Yes.
Yeah. And so like
but
kind
even
of tracking
they
them
like are kind of doubled because they're like
true.
themselves in 1930 and themselves when they were like, what, I think you said 28, right? And themselves in the 70s when they were like in their 60s. And so, and that you see fairly common, right? An actor will come on and be an older or younger version of themselves. But even in that, right, there's this sense in which it's like, we know they didn't change ages.
Right. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. You kind of roll with it and try to wonder what exactly is being said as a result of it. But yeah, I think the like, I mean, both from a like what it like makes a statement about, and what I love the idea of the like kind of circle or the cycle or wheel of like comes around again sort of ness that you track as a result of the doubling of them. Also though, like some of what you alluded to earlier, it's one of the like, cool technical challenges of this show. Certainly to have the opportunity to kind of play both distinctly different characters, fully different characters, but also characters that have progressed through time and gotten older, is a very interesting technical challenge. But then also the technical challenge that we've already sort of marveled at of like film as a medium finding its way into a play, into a stage play, and what that sort of like very different styles of acting, both different styles of acting, right? Like these actors have to like be good at stage acting, and they have to be, passable at least at film acting. And then you also have to kind of match this like, screwball 1930s style of sort of romantic comedy, rapid fire, quick dialogue sorts of stuff. So it's got all sorts of cool technical challenges in it.
Yeah, I mean, Lynn Nottage in the script is pretty specific about wanting you to not just like replicate, not just like do the lines from these older timelines and movies and things like that, but to put some work into replicating the acting style and the kind of the pace, especially. And then the Signature Theater, I think, has a really great documentary, just to praise them again, about how they made this film. And again, it's just a few minutes. It's just the end of the full movie, essentially. And the way that they replicated like the movie making style, which I think is very much a nod to what Lynn Nottage is asking from the actors and the acting style in the movie, absolutely. And it is, again, to me, it's like an interesting, like almost alienating thing to like see the actors and then see them in a movie. Like you go to the theater and then watch those actors live and then watch them in a movie that we know they made. Like there is some, to me, it feels like there's some distancing that is provided by that. I'm not sure about that, but it's just not something you experience very often. To have an actor both live and in a film in the same like experience, like that's just not a very common thing.
And I think especially for a play that is dealing with sort of trying to track a historical issue that is not just historical, but in fact is repeating and ongoing, but that it sort of has its roots in a historical moment, or at least the story does, to have the sort of full experience of someone trying to engage with this issue of like, if you're trying to look at the 1930s, you're watching something on film, or trying to get as close as you can to what happened in the 1930s or to what someone said in the 1930s. You're trying to find film, even the 70s, right? Like they just found this film that like is the first time it's being shown in certainly a very, very long time since it was on TV. So you found it. Let's watch it together. This is as close as we're going to get to Vera Stark in this moment. But then we also get the experience of like being there with them, which only theater can do, of like being in the room. And certainly there's a subjectivity of the playwright within that presentation, but we get the experience of like, oh, if only we were in the room. And then we get the presence of mind of like, oh, we're watching this thing, which we do all the time trying to find information. And that's a really subjective experience. And I just really like
that's a really interesting point, that like, because we've seen Act 1, where we were live in person with the actors playing these characters, and they were playing out private scenes, the kind of stuff that is not documented. It's not historical documentation in the same way that a film is. When we experience the film, and then we watch these critical scholars of various kinds try to make meaning of the film, it does sort of bring forward this like gap that is our ability to understand what happened in history purely through documentation. Because we, as the audience, have just experienced the huge gap between what it's like to have flesh and blood people in their private moments versus what exists in terms of like the things that we've kept historically, like a film.
Yeah. Yep. And while there's certainly correct statements being made by these experts and good guesses being made, you get the presence of like, if only we could know what it actually meant. And I think that's why that last scene is so powerful, because we get a little window. And again, it's not complete. There's lots of, as I finish this script, I have so many unanswered questions. Yeah. Like, where is Vera Stark? What did happen to her? None of those are necessarily answered, but you do get like one, it's so cool to get one more in-person moment with them where you do get an answer of like, how was this moment of film so powerful? And it's because of the subtext that they shared together. It's because of the subtext that was added to it and the motivation of the line. And it's so you get the full experience of like, in person, switch to film and trying to deduce from film, and then one more moment of like, this is the like touchstone of relationship and these characters that sparked that moment.
And just to highlight, I totally am with you, and I know we're close to the end of our time here, but the way that it's sort of imagined to happen at the end is that we've come to the end of this panel. The panel sort of moderator Herb, he sort of talks us out, and then we go back to the film. And again, I think it's a real movie. The movie plays on a screen. It's projected onto a screen somehow, a movie. And we go back to the movie and we watch this part of this scene again. And then we hear like the director call cut. And here's the stage direction. The women step out of the screen onto stage. Young Vera and Gloria from Belle of New Orleans, activity whirls around them. So what happens there in terms of what I can imagine happening is that we shift again from film to living bodies. And so one of the things that happens again is this, we the audience experience the gap between what is captured historically and the real living human beings. And that's one of the questions that this play asks is like, these people that we talk about that were making movies in the 30s, and we talk about why they did this and that and what it meant for this and that artistic reasons and this and that political reasons and this and that cultural reasons. Like these people like actually are real people. But our ability to connect with that is limited because if all we have are these movies or these documentations, they're public records, that stuff is not the same as flesh and blood people.
We are sadly down to the last couple moments of our time. There's so many great facets of this play. Definitely check out any of the productions that Jacob mentioned or any that you know about, because I think there's so many cool things about this play that make it really interesting technically to watch, but also really poignant from a thematic and topic standpoint. And certainly, as we sort of mentioned, that the sort of ongoing issues that this play continues to talk about make it very, very relevant. So highly recommend going and checking out any of those. And when you do, we'd love to be chatting about this play with all of you. You can find us on the social medias, find one and see if we're on it, but we're always at the username @NoScriptPodcast. We also have a Gmail, noscriptpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on those sites, and we'd love to keep talking about, by the way, Meet Vera Stark with you.
If you enjoyed this conversation, the beginning of our newest season, please recommend us to your family, your friends, anybody you know that likes conversations about theater, about writing, about all that kind of stuff. We're a great place to get those. Send them our way. They can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all the places you get your podcasts. You can also like our Facebook page, and there's just a link every Monday that's just easy to click and play from there. If there's some less tech-savvy folks in your life, that'd be easy way to find and play our episodes. Send them to our Facebook page. Until next week, when we're back with another conversation about another great script, I'm Jacob, here with Jackson. Thanks for joining us for No Script, the podcast.